And welcome back to Crit and Crit, and ladies, gentlemen, everyone between and beyond. I am Axion,
And I'm Scint.
and we are continuing Pokemon Christmas and our discussion of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol.
Yep, last time we had a very lengthy discussion about the Ghost of Christmas Presents visit and everything that went along with it. And we left off with the immediate appearance of the Ghost of Christmas Future, who is the least defined of any of the ghosts that has come to visit Ebenezer Scrooge this night. Marley we got a very good picture of, basically looking exactly as he did when he died. Scrooge recognized him at once. He wore the same clothes he always did. He had his hair the same way he always did. The Ghost of Christmas Past, we had a very clear description of neither young nor old, basically looking elderly but without wrinkles, reduced down to the size of a child, and with a candle basically for their head. Just a beacon with a hat that they carry with them if they need to darken that light. And then the Ghost of Christmas Present, just this jolly giant of a man, clad in a lush, long green robe trimmed with white fur, long curly hair, but only exists for Christmas night. So he spent his entire existence with Scrooge, which, there's a lot to unpack with that I didn't really think about last time, but tonight our focus is on the Ghost of Christmas Future. Thoughts before we get started, Axion?
It looks like I'm about to be attacked by a unicorn.
Took me a second.
So in most depictions, as I've said in one of the prior episodes, the Ghost of Christmas Future is depicted basically as a Grim Reaper type thing. It's a hooded shade that does not speak, has its concealed face, and only usually gestures or moves around. Also, I got a new party member from the in-game Wonder Trade setting. Tiny Tim the Rotom.
But how does a Rotom use a crutch? He can't be Tiny Tim. Why did you go with Thunderwave and not Spark? Because that would have done damage and also have the chance of paralysis.
Because I wanted to guarantee it so I could go first.
This just in, Tiny Tim cuts in line, uses Sympathy Play. Well, that's that. Tiny Tim can apparently mess you up.
So, getting back to the main story, Scrooge has been significantly humbled by the events of the past two spirits, and the appearance of the third spirit is incredibly unnerving to him.
Well, I mean, it would be, considering the other spirits established the pattern of, you will go back to sleep and we will come at our appointed time. Maybe a few minutes late just to mess with you, but the spirits will not come one immediately after the other. There will be a bit of a pause and time to decompress between. The Ghost of Christmas Future does not give him this. The instant the Ghost of Christmas Present withers away, Future is just there. A solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment which concealed its head, face, form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand. But for this it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. It kind of occurs to me that, like, if you didn't know this was about Christmas, you could take several snippets out of this and just make a horror book.
Yep.
But then, like, that's always been the joke, hasn't it? Like, you're one soundtrack change away from turning your rom-com, your Disney movie into a horror film. You just need to put everything in minor key, and suddenly all the cutesy whimsy is now downright horrifying because you've applied a little bit of a different tone to it.
Yep. So where does the spirit take Scrooge first?
Well, the spirit just points down. So, I mean, this could literally just be, we're taking Scrooge to hell. This is your personal hell. If we want to go too much into that, but let's just go with the play-by-play as we look first. They go to, well, the city. They scarcely seem to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. But there they were in the heart of it, on change amongst the merchants who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups, and looked at their watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals, and so forth as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointing to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk, where we don't actually get to learn who they're talking about, just that a man has died. It surprised people. No one knew really what was wrong with him, and he didn't seem to have anyone with him, and the first question anyone asks is, what has he done with his money?
Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush here, because we all know from years of cultural osmosis that they're talking about Scrooge himself. But even without that knowledge, it's not exactly a hard stretch.
Yeah, I mean, why else would they be showing him this? Because everything else the ghosts have shown him is connected to Scrooge in some way. Mm-hmm. Really, the only other people that it would have made sense for the death to be that Scrooge was taken to see would have been his nephew, possibly the only person he gives half of a crap about, or Tiny Tim, which, we do get to see that Tiny Tim has passed in this hypothetical future, after Scrooge gets tired of basically hearing about people slagging off this one man, whose name he doesn't actually get, because Scrooge apparently either doesn't have the same self-awareness that we've been hoping he does, was desperately trying to fool himself about it, or, I don't know, he just didn't seem to piece together until the spirit outright points out his gravestone with his name on it that, yes, the man who died, unloved, unmourned, the only emotion anyone felt about his death was relief, is you. Which, I mean, that's gotta suck.
Yep. I personally read it as him being very much in denial and wanting to ignore it as long as possible. Kind of in the same boat that he was back with Marley himself, where he knows the truth, but the spirits want to make him say it.
And there is something to be said for that. A lot of people, like, you can look at a situation, you can put two and two together, but until you say the words, it's not fully real to you.
Mm-hmm. Precisely.
Muck, yay. You know, it occurs to me that, like, a lot of people slag off the newer generations of Pokemon for, like, it's Keith, that's not a Pokemon, whereas, like, first gen has, it's literally a pile of crap. This is the most creative thing ever. So, maybe Pokemon's always just been weird. And by maybe, I mean, of course it's always been weird.
Anyway, so, they arrive in the city, and the first place they go is these people just talking about somebody and being dead. And then, if I remember correctly, they go off to... I don't remember what the term used for it in the book is, but it's basically a pawn shop.
Yeah, but we're not quite there yet. Like, as I just really want to look at what people are saying about the dead man, where it's likely to be a very cheap funeral. For upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose you make up a party and volunteer? I don't mind going if a lunch is provided, but if I must be fed if I make one. Well, I am the most disinterested among you, after all, for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch, but I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye! So it's literally just, oh, he's dead? Well, I don't think there's going to be much of a funeral. No one cares enough. You think there'll be free food? We can go for free food. Yeah, I'm fine with free food. Yeah, let's go pretend we cared about him. There's free food. And then Phantom takes him to another group of people, He knew these men also perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy and of great importance. He had made a point of always standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view. Well, old Scratch has got his own at last, hey? So I am told. Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose? No, something else to think about. Good morning. All they have to say about this man's passing is, well, devil took his own. So, that's really good to know, especially since Scrooge points out he always made sure that he was on their good side.
Yep, but only with regards to business. Nothing personal.
Which is interesting considering how important, like, these days, PR seems to be to running a business. Like, if literally everybody knows that you are an awful person, there will be, and if you have competition in your industry, people will generally try to go with your competitor because, well, I don't want my money going to you. This doesn't seem to be the case back in the Victorian era where we're looking at Scrooge here, so that's just an interesting modern view on it.
Right.
Yes, then we go to an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, and although he recognized the situation in bad repute, the ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half-naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly, alleys and archways like so many cesspools disgorged their offenses of smell and dirt and life upon the straggling streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime and filth and misery. Far in the stead of infamous resort, there was a low-browed beetling shop below a penthouse roof where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were brought. So yes, here is our pawn shop of ill repute, where many of the dead man's, aka Scrooge's, belongings are brought by an opportunist who happens to find them. Which includes, interestingly enough, the shirt he was wearing. As it was pointed out by the person who claimed them, well, it's not that they were going to waste it. What do you mean waste it? Bury him in it. He's not going to miss it. And given how much respect is generally given to the dead, whether for religious or superstitious reasons, like fear of ghosts coming up, it's interesting that that would be something that Dickens drew attention to. I have no doubt it happened on a fairly routine basis because, like, are you really going to be able to stop people from going through every single grave, especially one of someone who doesn't have enough mourners to actually care for them and basically be there to keep kind of an eye on it in some way?
Right.
Like, if Scrooge had had loving family or anyone to look in on him, there probably wouldn't have been the opportunity for looters to go through. They take his bed curtains, rings, and all. Just everything they could, they pawned. Because, well, it's not like Scrooge had a lot of money laying around. He kept it in the bank. So people would take what they can get and sell it for what they could get, and that would be the main way that people would have thanked him for anything. Because it's not like Scrooge, as of the timeline we are currently in, has gone out of his way to make a good name for himself outside of business, and his business, in many ways, hurt people. Hurt a lot of people.
And speaking of, what's next?
I think you have to fall down a hole.
Hello, little girl.
She ghost teleported you. I see they took out Suicune. Or is that only in Crystal? I can't remember.
Well, normally all three of the dogs are down there, but Suicune does something special there in Crystal. But,
it's been a while.
But more importantly, they were all gone, and I have Surf. So Freddy now has a water move.
Yay. It's interesting how Freddy learned to surf so far from either coast.
Especially in the winter where everything's frozen over. Anyway, so where do we go next once we're done with having a look at this pawn shop?
We go to meet Scrooge's wish. Spirit, this is a fearful place, and leaving it I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me, let us go. If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, said Scrooge, quite agonized, show that person to me. Spirit, I beseech you.
Alright, so the spirit gives him what he wants. And where does it take him?
It takes him to a house. At long length the expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed and which he struggled to repress. Is it good or bad? Bad. We are quite ruined? No, there is hope yet. If he relents, there is. Nothing is past hope if such a miracle has happened. He is past relenting. He is dead. So, we have found a place where there is emotion upon this lonely man's death. Relief. Because here is a couple who seems to be quite deep in debt to our deceased, who has every intention of making their payments, but hard times. But they've gotten a little bit more time to get their affairs in order and make up the payment before somebody picks up their debt. And, well, this is actually really the first indication I had of the specific job Scrooge has as a moneylender, is that, like, the only people who have any emotion on his death are people who are in debt to him because, oh, thank God, we have, like, a week to get extra funds together so we won't lose everything.
Yep, and maybe our next creditor will not be so unkind.
Yep, to whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, but before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we were not, it would be bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor and his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts. So, yeah, we have a couple who's, like, absolutely ashamed of this relief because they know it's not at all socially acceptable to feel this way about the death of a fellow human, but in the same way, like, it's, yes, they're feeling relief at the death of a human who was basically making their life miserable. And yeah.
I mean,
so
at this point, can you even blame them? Because the way they talk about it is as if this was going to ruin them and put them out of their home, yeah, at the drop of a hat.
Yep, when the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night, and to me, when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then. So, it wasn't even, hey, let me off my debt, it's, please, give me an extra week, I will have your money, I will pay you back. But Scrooge being Scrooge, if we want to go back to D&D stuff, I would call extraordinarily lawful. I set these terms, you agreed to them, and you're trying to change the terms now?
Yep. There's a scene in the Mickey Mouse's Christmas Carol adaptation that is actually kind of appropriate to this. This particular scene with the relieved couple doesn't appear in most adaptations that I've watched, but it kind of got adapted out of order in the Mickey Mouse Christmas Carol and tagged onto this section with Belle during his past. And Scrooge McDuck as Ebenezer Scrooge, when she comes to him to talk their situation out, he tells her that her parents are late on the payment and he's foreclosing on them.
Makes you wonder why she left him, huh? Because, I mean, you don't do that to your in-laws, dude. But, yeah, it's possibly a choice made because, like, since we're trying to focus on a sympathy angle here, we probably would, like, I can see why they wouldn't put this into the future of many adaptations, because if we're meant to start feeling sympathy for Scrooge at this point, him continuing to be overtly cruel would probably distract from that, but also I think they tend to go for the double gut punch of not only just Scrooge, you're dead, but also he asks for one other thing, because, like, he's shaken about what he's seen and with how no one could care about this deceased man, and asks, "Let me see some tenderness connected with a death, or that dark chamber spirit which we left just now will be forever present to me." So, as we can probably guess from what the Ghost of Christmas Present said, that death is that of Tiny Tim.
Yep. So we should hop over to the Cratchits.
Yep. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and children seated round the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard these words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out as he and the spirit crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on? So, as we saw before, the Cratchits though very poor, are very happy with each other, a family that loves each other very much, very loud and enthusiastic with their affection for each other. So, without even being told, we can probably already tell it's Tiny Tim's death, simply because of how somber they are and the lack of his presence. And, well, yeah, plus, we had been overtly warned that Tiny Tim has generic Victorian illness and is dying.
Yep.
I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. It must be near his time. Past it, rather. But I think he's walked a little slower than he used these few last evenings, Mother. I had known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed. But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. So, the family has been very deeply affected by the loss of their youngest member, as you do. Which, that's perfectly understandable. But this is deliberately written to show the impact that Tiny Tim's death has had on the family with the maximum possible effect for the reader and for Scrooge, because obviously this lesson is meant for Scrooge. Look what will happen if you do not change your ways. And Scrooge, as we commented on last time, latched on to Tiny Tim surprisingly hard.
So Cratchit gets home later than expected. I forget, was there anything else that happened before he got home?
Not really, just Mom and the girls are sewing something, and it's dark fabric, so it hurts their eyes, so she stops sewing because she doesn't want to look like she's struggling around Bob, who's already struggling enough with the loss of Tiny Tim. And it's just, the family is upset and talking about going through the grief process. And we can kind of get the impression that Tiny Tim only passed a couple of days ago, from just how they've mentioned it. Because it's still a very raw wound. So that might also almost make it worse for them, because we do remember that the Ghost of Christmas Present said that Tiny Tim would not live to see another Christmas. But getting that close to the holiday and then falling at the last hurdle almost hurts more in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Especially because, I'm sure this has happened in many families of, it's close to the holiday, you've already got presents together, and then you look under the tree, and there's the present for the deceased that will never be opened. They'll never see it. You'll never know if they liked it, you'll never know. And you'll never see the smile on their face when they open it.
Yeah.
Tiny Tim grew to level 18! Yay! We have the worst timing.
We do. Sorry, I was...
Can you imagine if we dropped that right when you beat Morty? Do-do-do-do-do-do!
Oh dear.
Yeah, I'm sure none of us shall forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there was among us. Never, Father. And I know, my dears, when we recollect how patient and mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. So that's all they can take away, is just remember your brother, remember this, and just be kind to each other for his sake. And again, the whole purpose of this novel is be kind to people, do what you can to make the world a better place. It's better to be kind than wealthy, according to Dickens. Or if you're going to be wealthy, what's the point if you're not going to use it to help people? Scrooge has basically shown that this entire time of, Scrooge is a very well-off man. Scrooge has worked very hard to get to where he is in life, and it may or may not have been entirely scrupulous in how he did so. But Scrooge has also isolated himself from everyone. He has done quite a lot to alienate himself from everyone else. And now we see him in the future, dead, stripped of everything, even final dignity, barely above a pauper's grave. He will have no mourners, and the only people talking at the funeral are the ones joking about, hey, is there free food? I'll go to funeral for free food. And that has got to be sobering, humbling for anyone, which is obviously why Scrooge was shown it.
Yep.
But something I do want to talk about here is, I mentioned this during our discussion on Christmas presents. Freddy.
Mm-hmm. Scrooge's one relative, you would presume, especially given their interactions in prior scenes, that Freddy would mourn for his uncle and the lost
Connection.
Yeah, and the lost opportunity to have that family relationship with him.
Especially if Scrooge passed this close to Christmas, as we can see happens, which obviously we get the reveal that the gravestone has his name on it, and Scrooge screams, and da-da-da-da. But if Freddy has every year, and will continue every year, to come back and invite Scrooge to Christmas dinner, he would have known that Scrooge was ailing. He would have known that Scrooge was not doing well. He would have known that Scrooge was dead, presumably. Because Freddy is, as far as we're aware, his only next of kin. So either Dickens forgot about Freddy, Dickens intentionally omitted Freddy because he wanted Scrooge to get the gut punch, or we can assume that Scrooge did something to alienate Freddy in the intervening year. So I don't know which it is. It's really hard to gauge authorial intent, especially when the author has been dead for over a century.
Yep.
But, like, it's just an interesting oversight, considering how important to Scrooge's character development Freddy's existence is. Freddy is there as a reminder of his sister and the connection to his past. Freddy is there as just a beacon of hope in his present, a persistent source of joy. And Freddy is absolutely absent in this bleak future. So, don't know, something is keeping Freddy away, whether it's Scrooge's own actions, Freddy finally giving up, which seems out of character for him, or maybe Freddy hasn't heard yet. Because Scrooge and Freddy don't seem to be very close, and it's possible that Scrooge would not have gotten word to Freddy, especially if, you know, doctors cost money, I'm not paying for that.
And not to mention, as we learned from the solicitors in the first scene of this part of the story, he had just died the last night. This is the morning after. So, if he hasn't been in communication with Freddy during the course of his illness, there's every chance no one's had a chance to go over to Freddy's house and tell him.
I actually wonder how many people in Scrooge's circle, I can't really say friend group because that would involve Scrooge having friends and Scrooge, even know that Scrooge has a nephew, because it seems like Freddy comes by just for holidays and special occasions because Scrooge otherwise doesn't give him the time of day, and even on those occasions doesn't give him the time of day, but Freddy tries anyway because it's Christmas, Uncle Scrooge.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if nobody that Scrooge works with knows about Freddy. Or those who do, they might know he exists, but they don't know where he lives. They don't know how to get in touch with him.
And it's likely that, like, Scrooge's lawyer, if he has had any chance to get there, has any reason to contact him because, well, people legitimately aren't sure what Scrooge is going to do with his money. It's likely he didn't leave Freddy anything, because, well, why would he? Except for, you know, being the only relative he has left. But we don't know what Scrooge was actually planning to do with all the money he's accumulated. The best guess anyone has is leave it to his company, which is going to be in the hands of, I don't know, Bob Cratchit, because he works there. He's the only employee we see, so who's going to take that on? We never know.
And we have no way to know. Bob doesn't really have the knowledge needed to take up Scrooge's position. He might know a few things from being a clerk, but he likely doesn't know the heavier details behind everything.
I'd just go with your mud slaps, just lower his accuracy, because otherwise you're just going to sleep off.
I hit him once.
Yeah, but you could be doing some damage.
Anyway, so more than likely his business is going to get basically handed over to another businessman, one of his counterparts, or sold off.
I hope he gets a good price for it. Not that he'll care.
So, there has been the Cratchits, there have been the,
Like, that's
Predator
really
family.
it.
And then
Like, that's really all we see.
and all that's left at the end is the graveyard.
Yep, because, well, though we hurry now is where my place of occupation is and has been for a length of time. I see the house, let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped, the hand pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder. Why do you point away? The inexorable finger underwent no change. So Scrooge either is legitimately that deeply in denial about who they have been talking about with regards to death or he just hasn't put it together. But he does finally get led to his grave. Scrooge crept toward it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I that man who lay upon the bed? He cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, spirit. Oh, no, no. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Do you ever have those moments where you dwell on how certain words change over time? I'm just going to leave that there.
I'm actually
You're welcome for that.
I'm not quite sure what you're getting at.
I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse.
Oh. Honestly, it did not click for me. Why does this haunter no mimic?
Because it's just haunting you. So let's see. Mean look, mimic. I'm going to assume. I think it's a nightshade. So I think curse is going to be the other one. Oh, spite. Which, I mean, that is an OP move. Spite is the most powerful force in the universe.
This is true. So...
Oh, I thought he healed for sure. So he learned Mud Slap and then proceeded to never use it against you.
I guess.
Yeah, so Scrooge is shaken to his core and pleads for the spirit, send me back, I will change my ways, I will fall asleep in the middle of a battle.
Marley gonna come in and say it.
Just like in the book.
Ah! Stop putting me to sleep.
Why show me this if I am past all hope? For the first time the hand appeared to shake. Good spirit, he pursued us. Down upon the ground he fell before it. Your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.
And Scrooge wakes up.
I like how we've timed this, that we managed to get rid of the last of the spirits right as you beat the ghost gym.
Yep.
That was unintentional.
Nope, but it works out. And we will continue with the conclusion of A Christmas Carol and the rest of the story next time. Thank
Bye.
you for watching.